So now whatever we say is going to go on the cloud. Okay, so any questions before we start? Anyone? Otherwise, can you quickly tell me a little bit about yourself, starting with Roshni? Roshni, which city are you from and which subjects are you studying in your 12th or 11th, 11th, 12th? Which specialization, which subjects did you pick up?
Good evening, sir. I'm from Hyderabad, Telangana.
Okay, all right.
I took commerce in my 12th, so
Fantastic. Sia, how about you? That's my way of checking that you are actually in the class listening to me and have not just logged in. Okay, so apparently Sia is still going to take some time. Sahana, and in case I do not pronounce your name correctly, please correct me once and then we can go ahead and work on that. So Sahana, Bihar is a state. Which particular city? I'll tell you a very interesting tidbit about my family, okay? So uh, I am from Punjab. So there is this tiny little place in Punjab called Abohar. That's the city that I think of as my ancestral place. But my grandfather moved from Abohar to Aurangabad in Bihar. He was a government contractor, and the entire family moved with him. Unfortunately, he passed away in a road accident when my father was 10, 11-year old. After which, of course, the family eventually came back. So I do have that connection there. Yep. Ashish, how about you? Where are you from? What do you study? Sahana very conveniently did not tell me what she studies. Hmm. In that case, we also have Vaishnavi who has joined us, but let's go ahead and now start. Huh? So we plan to go ahead and work on this area called logical reasoning. Huh? So all of us use reasoning in our daily lives. However, the problem is that we have never studied it formally. In fact, everybody that I've interacted with so far, you guys have not really studied this area formally. I'm mindful of that, and therefore I plan to start you from absolute basics so that there is no scope of misinterpretation. So I will basically we'll have a deep dive into the concepts, and we will also go ahead and practice as much as we can together, because logical reasoning is one important section for us as far as our exams go. So my primary focus is going to be on the CLAT exam, but in between we may go ahead and schedule some additional sessions if need be to cover some of those other question types that get asked in some of these other exams from this particular domain. Now, the thing is, if I look at the evolution of the CLAT exam, there was a time when the reasoning section was proper reasoning section, where the questions asked could have been termed reasoning based questions conventionally. So you had paragraph based critical reasoning, you had these statement assumption questions, statement conclusion questions, course of action questions, strong argument, weak argument questions. All those varieties used to exist there. But then over the course of last 3 years, they have made some strange moves. And now because of that, I will say that their logical reasoning section and their reading comprehension section have have kind of become similar. Okay, there is a significant amount of overlap between the two. The only difference is that in the logical reasoning section, you have passages, but the number of reasoning based questions is higher. Huh. But you still have your conventional RC kind of questions here and there. And when I talk about the reading comprehension section, you still get a lot of typical RC kind of questions, okay? Main idea of the passage and this and that. But then in between, they may still ask you reasoning based questions there as well. So I will give you first and foremost in the logical reasoning classes, you will learn the basics of each one of the question types that get asked under the kind of reasoning that CLAT uses. After that, I will take you through exam level questions and some previous year questions so that we are able to see whether we are comfortable or not. So that's the curve, that's the line that I'll start with. But first up, the basics. Okay. So when we say logical reasoning here, it is actually a part of a larger area called verbal reasoning, or the kind of logical reasoning that we get is a part of something that we call verbal reasoning. So a very obvious question, a very obvious concern in our mind could be that what exactly is verbal reasoning? So let's break it down into some smaller components and let's start here. So what is reasoning? If I were to ask this to you, what will your answer be? How do you define it? What's reasoning?
Process to think about anything.
Could you please come again? Can you be a little louder? I'm actually using a laptop whose speakers are very tinny. So yeah, go ahead. What was your take? Reasoning is
Process of thinking something or making a judgment.
fabulous process of thinking, making a judgment. So that says yeah. Mohima says that it is logical. I'll just read exactly what she wrote. Logically conversing is reasoning. Okay. What else? Mohima, what exactly is logic? Ah, Alankrita, I absolutely love it when you guys keep your videos on. Rationally, what is logic? What is rationality?
Sir, keeping emotions out of our thought process, that will be rationality.
Okay. So, how about understanding it with the help of an example? There you go. Have you seen this movie, Bahubali?
Sir.
Just drop a quick yes or a no. Yes, no. You can drop it in the chat. Who am I hiding though? Oh, this guy. Huh. Okay. So, for those of us who have watched Bahubali, did you like it? Did you like the movie? Once again, a yes or a no? Hmm. Okay, so you notice the moment you say that, hey, I watched this movie and I liked it, in a way, you telling me that Bahubali is a good movie. You liked it, right? So why did you like it? What makes you think that Bahubali is a good movie? Why? Okay, the plot. So a couple of us loved the storyline, the plot. What else? Come on, reasoning, right? So it's all about thinking. What else did you like? Just the plot. Now imagine if we take the script of Bahubali and reshoot it with us acting as actors, you, me, the rest. I don't think it is going to be that fabulous anymore. Characters. Okay. So there you go. The only requirement that I have in reasoning classes is that you keep your brain cells ticking. Fundamentally, it is about thinking. And I know that a class immediately after lunch hour can at times be like, you could feel drowsy, sleepy, God knows what. But bear with me. Okay, so I've asked this question to some other individuals too. Then I asked them why they liked it. I got reasons like, sir, the story and the grand scale of it. The reason could be the acting. The reason could be those fabulous action sequences. The reasons could be, all those special effects and computer generated imagery that was used. So you notice what's happening. There was a day when you were watching this movie for the first time. On that day, when you were watching this movie for the first time, all these facts reached your mind, right? Once these facts reached your mind ran them through a process. See this? And the end result of this process is this conclusion or this opinion that you have today that Bahubali is a good movie, right? So this process, the one that is right here, this process is called reasoning. So if I were to define it, I will say that reasoning is a special type of thinking in which we think over some facts in order to arrive at a conclusion. And here it is in writing. It is a special type of thinking in which we think over some facts in order to arrive at a conclusion. So you notice thinking can be of various types. So right now you're sitting here in this particular class. You can think of the person that you have a crush on. So if somebody does that, should we call that reasoning? It's thinking, but we won't call it reasoning. However, if that person starts thinking of, what should I do that my crush becomes a part of my life, comes into my life, then that person is going to think over some facts in order to arrive at a conclusion. So in that situation, we will say that the person is engaging in reasoning. So it is a type of thinking that we use in our everyday life extensively. It's a very integral part of our lives, and we use it for a host of purposes. We use it for a host of reasons. So you may use reasoning to arrive at decisions. You may use reasoning to predict certain things. You may use reasoning to convince or persuade others of some things. You may use reasoning at times even to understand certain phenomena. So you'd use it for a host of different purposes, but the core of all of these is reasoning. So now that we know what reasoning is, let's get into the next question. We are studying verbal reasoning after all. So what is verbal? What's your definition of it? Go ahead. You can unmute and share the answer, or you can drop it in the chat. Oh, Mohima, that's a virtual background or an actual tree?
Say it's an actual tree.
Damn.
Like I took a photo.
I'm not able to hear you clearly. As I said, I'm using a device whose speakers are pretty troublesome. So it's not you, it's me, but So verbal, guys, what is verbal?
So anything that is spoken.
Fantastic. Okay, so one answer that I'm getting is verbal is spoken. Anya has also shared that. What else? So, okay, spoken or oral. So it is a very popular misconception. Seriously, it's a very popular misconception. I'll tell you why. In fact, you know the right answer. Are you aware of something called non-verbal communication?
Yes, sir.
So what do we mean by non-verbal communication? What is that?
To expressing things by gestures.
Fabulous. So when we convey through gestures, body language, facial expressions, eyes, clothes, color, space. Remember, there are times when we want to intimidate somebody, threaten somebody. And you've probably seen movies where when one character wants to intimidate the other character, that person would walk right up to that person. Their noses will practically be almost touching, and then he look down on that person. Even that's communication, right? By invading the personal space of somebody else. So all these different forms of communication where we express ourselves without using words is non-verbal. So what is verbal communication? Verbal communication is communication that happens using words. Now, those words need to be spoken or written.
So they could
It's
be
spoken.
both.
Either. Either it can be written, it can be spoken. So verbal is not restricted to spoken. A lot of people do use it in that sense. He verbally told me, when he orally said something, he verbally told me, but that's not technically correct. So verbal as an adjective means related to words or language. So when we talk about reasoning, we can get a lot of different varieties of questions. Some of those questions rely on images, some questions rely on mathematical concepts, and then there are some questions that rely on language. So when we say verbal reasoning, we're talking about those aspects of reasoning that rely on what? Language. And that is why you and I are basically working on it. Verbal reasoning and English are my areas of specialty. Wow. So there can be a lot of different types of reasoning. One such type is verbal reasoning. Fair enough. So any questions so far? Anything that I can answer so far? Anything that you want to know? Giving you 5-6 seconds to share it or drop it in the chat. Okay, nothing yet? Okay, in that case, let's move on. So before I move on and teach you verbal reasoning, I need to talk about some basic terms that are used in the world of reasoning. In fact, the terms are so throughout these classes, throughout our discussion on questions subsequently, we will be using these terms very extensively. And I'm not talking about some very complicated, weird terms that you've never really seen. In fact, I'm going to talk about exactly 4 terms. Which 4 terms? Here they are on your screen. And I think with an exception of premise, the other 3 words are already known to you. So considering that these other 3 words are already known to you, why do I want to talk about these? Why do I wish to discuss it? So I'll tell you why. When we talk to each other in our everyday life, we realize that our language, the language in which we communicate to each other, this can be at times ambiguous. It may not be very clear. There are times when people misinterpret what we say, misunderstand what we say. I'm sure it has happened to you, right? Where you said something to someone and that person understood it in a completely different manner. And that leads to a communication gap and a lot of problems. Now, one of the reasons behind this communication gap is this trait in a language that a single word can contain multiple meanings or can have multiple meanings, isn't it? Come to think of it, if I ask you for the meaning of the word appropriate, what will your answer be? What's the meaning of appropriate?
So something which is set by someone or according to certain standards.
Terrific. So Harsh says perfect. Moima says apt, and then of course your answer too. Perfect, apt, suitable. Okay, now here is a sentence. Here is a sentence. Arpita, proper, perfect. Huh? That's absolutely. So here is a sentence where I'll use this word, and then you tell me whether these meanings apply to that sentence or not. The builder has appropriated government land. The builder has appropriated government land. So has he done something which is proper, apt, perfect, suitable? That's a positive act or a negative act? Very clearly negative, right? So you notice the problem. You were absolutely right. Your meanings were correct. When you use appropriate as an adjective, yes, those are the meanings that it carries. But when you use appropriate as a verb, it contains a different meaning. As a verb, it means that you have done something which is illegal. You have taken possession of something that you had no right to take possession of. Right? That thing did not belong to you. So a single word can actually have multiple meanings. Here is another one. Let's do a, now that we are at it, it will help us somewhere or the other subsequently. How about this word? What is the meaning of the word sanction? Come on, think.
You're giving permission to pass something, basically.
Fabulous. So sanction is permission. Sanction is approval. Okay. So here is a sentence. The US has imposed trade sanctions on Iran. The US has imposed trade sanctions on Iran. So there is an approval here or a ban here?
Ban.
So you see, when you use when we use sanction as a verb, it means approval. But when we start using it as a noun, it means a ban. So that's the problem. And let's now pick up a relevant word for our class. A little while ago, I asked Mohima about what is logic. After all, we are studying an area called logical reasoning, right? So what do we even mean by logic? What's logic? What's your definition of this? Now, I'll tell you where I'm coming from. A lot of friends of mine, when they use the word logic, they use it interchangeably with common sense. For them, logic is common sense. See, right now, I am on the 6th floor of a building. Now, if I want to go to the ground floor, what do? I'll take the stairs or I'll use the lift, the elevator and go. That's logical. If I do that, that makes sense. So we'll say that's logical. But what if I tell you that, oh, you take the stairs, dude, I don't have time. I'm in a great hurry. So I'll jump from the balcony and go. Every second counts. So if I say that to you, I'm on 6th floor, you look at me and you say, are you crazy? Have you gone mad? Why are you talking about such illogical things? Now, why is it illogical? Because jumping from the balcony of the 6th floor to reach the ground floor does not make sense. It is against common sense. So you'll call it illogical, right? So logic is common sense. But now tell me something. When the examiner says, I'm going to test your logic, is he testing our common sense through that section? Chances are that you've already seen some of the logical reasoning questions or previous year questions. He's not checking that. So what is logic? So logic is also the name of a subject that you can study. Yep, you can enroll in a college and pick up a paper that says formal logic, informal logic. In fact, in a law school, they'll teach you all these things. It's pretty relevant. Argumentation is going to be very important. So logic is also the name of a branch of learning under philosophy where you essentially deal with ideal thought processes. That's also logic. So when the examiner says that, hey, I'm going to test you on logic, what he says is that, hey, you know what? I am going to see how close you are to an ideal thought process. How close you are in terms of your thinking to a very structured, precise way of approaching things. So you notice the examiner may use a word, we may hear it and use that other meaning, and that can lead to the communication gap, which is a problem. So it's the same thing here. I may use a word, say argument. You hear this and use another meaning that leads to a communication gap between you and me. And that is something that I would not obviously want. And therefore, we need to kind of sit down together and define these terms right at the outset. So let's start with the first term, statement. So throughout these classes, if I say statement, this is what I mean by it. So please read it. So whenever you see a group of words that affirms or denies something, you will call that a statement. For example, if I say it is raining, now you notice in this case, I am affirming something. So that's a statement. If I say it is not raining, I am now denying something. Well, that is also a statement. So Affirming something or denying something is statement. Now, here is a bit of homework for you. Your homework is to figure out the difference between, I'll just write it down. A statement and a sentence. Okay? Because after all, I mean, you will look at it is raining, it is not raining, and say that, hey, these are sentences, right? I already know a term called sentence. So why do I need to learn another term? Are there any differences? That's something that we need to explore. So statement, and see, statement happens to be the building block of the kind of reasoning that we plan to study. So the smallest unit of the reasoning that you and I will study together, the smallest unit of that is going to be a statement, not a sentence. There are some differences. In case something pops up in your mind right now, you can go ahead and share it. Otherwise, that's your homework. Take some time. Anybody who wants to share what comes to your mind in terms of the difference? Arpita, look at this. But then once again, let's use that example, right? When I say it is raining, so Arpita says sentence conveys a thought. But then it is raining, does it convey a thought? We are calling it a statement. Or Saksham, that's interesting. A sentence does not need to be a fact. Saksham, a statement also, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by it? I mean, going by the standard dictionary definition of fact, fact is basically a piece of information that is true. So are we saying that a statement has to be true? No, no, it's not raining right now. Even then I can say it is raining.
Statement is a basic fact or opinion.
Can you give me an example, Sia? Any example? Arey Vaishnavi says, which makes complete sense. You've reminded me of my grammar classes from the school. That was the definition of sentence. Remember, sentence is a group of words which makes complete sense. I bet 90% of us do not even know what that definition means. Okay, Ishika, interesting, but it is a lot simpler than that. Ishika, it's actually a lot simpler, so I'll just read it out. Ishika says statement talks always with conviction, but the sentence does not always talk with conviction. Harsh, statement is like declaring something which is right or wrong. Okay, maybe. So, homework, okay? So please make sure that you go ahead, read it thoroughly, and then share it with me. So, now you know what a statement means, right? In this class, in the reasoning classes, whenever we say this, statement means a group of words that affirms or denies something. Okay, now statements are of two types. So statements can be of two types. So what are those two types? Those two types are premise and conclusion. So what exactly is a premise? So see, here is the definition. Premise is a statement because it's a type of statement, right? But it is a special type of statement that goes on to provide support to some other statement. It is a statement that provides support to some other statement. Fair enough? For example, what if I say that, I got late because I was stuck in traffic. So if you look at it carefully, you'd realize that there are two statements here. So what are those two statements? Statement one, two facts which are being affirmed or denied. I got late. I was stuck in traffic. So which one of these two is providing support to the other one?
I was
Notice in this case, second
state.
is providing support to the first one, right? If you ask this question, why, why did I get late? You'd give the second statement as the answer. So that's supporting the first one. So the second one here is going to be called a premise. So in our daily life, the terms that we use for premise are reason or basis. For example, I tell you, in fact, this happened with me in one of our previous classes where a person looked at me in a class and said, okay, my name is Vikrant, by the way. I said, Vikrant sir, why should I study? Why should I study from you? Right? Why should I study from you? For that matter, I mean, when you look at it, why should you study with me? Why? So I gave some reasons. I said that, yeah, you want to, that one thing is sure, that you want to study with an excellent teacher. And I believe that I am an excellent teacher. Now, how do you know that I am an excellent teacher? I can give you some basis for this. One of the things that a person would typically want to see is, yeah, the teacher who comes and teaches me, does he know his stuff? If he knows that area, then he's an excellent teacher. So for example, now I keep writing all these exams. Okay. So one of the exams that I very routinely write is this exam called the CAT, where the difficulty level of English is pretty high. And in that exam, I have scored 100% and 100 percentile, which tells you that I know my stuff. No, I could answer everything. Then the other thing is that I have experience. You know that this is my 24th year of teaching. That's a lot. So I know my stuff. I've been teaching for a while, but does that mean I'm a good teacher? Well, I can give you some evidence from the peer group that on a scale of 5, my feedback approval rating has been 4.76, which is as high as it gets. You can't make everybody amazingly happy. But then you notice what I've constructed is a scenario where there are 4 statements. But here, this, and this, these 3 are supposed to support the fact that I'm an excellent teacher. So we'll call these our premises. Okay, a small note on pronunciation. In the singular, you can call it a premise or a premise. Both the pronunciations are considered acceptable. However, when it comes to the plural, we always use premises because premises refers to a building. Now, the easiest way of avoiding it is, avoiding this mistake is to stick to calling it a premise even in singular. Okay, so we'd be calling it a premise, premises. Premise is another name for reason or basis. So I am giving you a set of statements here. Can you help me identify the premises? So I'll label them. I'll go ahead and label them. So that's a statement. Then this is a statement. And that's a statement. So that's your third one. So can you identify the premises? Because at the end of the day, every other thing that we do in reasoning, it all boils down to our ability to recognize, identify premises and conclusions. So you notice when it comes to these three, the third one is our conclusion. Environment must play some part in determining IQ. On what basis are we saying it? We are saying that, hey, look at identical twins. Identical twins happen to have the same genes, yet they often have different IQ test scores. What does it tell us? It tells us that IQ does not depend solely on genes, because had that been the case, their IQs must have been identical. Since they're not identical, there are some other factors at play as well. So it's the first and the second sentence that act as a basis here. So these are basically your premises, right? With the third one. So let's move over to the next term, conclusion. Now, what is a premise? Premise is a statement that provides support to some other statement. So obviously, if you are providing support to some other statement, there has to be another statement that is receiving the support, right? So the statement that goes on to receive that support is called the conclusion. So for example, in this particular case, environment must play some part. That's our conclusion. I got late because I was stuck in traffic. I was stuck in traffic was the premise. I got late was the conclusion. Fair enough? And don't worry, we'll keep on working together to refine it as we move on. Okay. Then the fourth and the last basic term that I want to share with you is the term argument. So what is your definition of argument? If I ask you to define it, how would you define it? Go ahead. What's an argument? What is the word that you typically use for it? Okay. So to oppose a statement. Yes, that's correct. To oppose argument. Anything else?
To put forward different opinions.
To put forth a different opinion. Yes. Okay. Harsh has shared a technical message with me in the private chat. So has Mohima. Harsh, there's just a teeny weeny error there, but otherwise, yeah, it's fabulous. We'll be able to look at it. So, in our day-to-day life, yes, there are a lot of meanings of argument that we use. There are people who say that argument basically means to share an opinion, or to take up a stance on something. Argument can refer to a difference of opinion. Argument can refer to a heated discussion or a debate. At times, even an altercation, right? Even an altercation can be लड़ाई झगड़े पे हो गई बात, तो even that is an argument. So yes, all of these meanings are correct. We do use all of these meanings in English, but in reasoning, we do not use any of these meanings. In the world of reasoning, we have a very specific definition of argument, and here it is on your screen. An argument is a set of interconnected statements that contains a conclusion. So three core things. It is a set of statements. All these statements are interconnected, and within this set, you need to have a conclusion. If I write it in a more elaborate manner, so once again, it's a set of statements. Some of these statements are going to be premises, and exactly one is going to be a conclusion. And the intention of those premises must be to provide support to the conclusion or to act as a basis for that conclusion. So that's your argument basically. Okay. So if I try to capture it pictorially, then that's how an argument looks like. There are some premises, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, leading up to a conclusion. So this entire structure is called an argument. Now look at all these other meanings that we use. They actually come from this definition. Come to think of it, let's look at let's look at something. For example, I noticed this debate on social media a little while ago about this movie called Animal. So there were some people who said that Animal is a great, fabulous movie, right? So people who thought that Animal is a great movie, they have their own reasons, right? They said, oh, it's a good movie because of A, B, and C. And then there were people who did not like Animal. They were like, nah, Animal is a horrible movie because of X, Y, and Z. So what is happening here? Look at it. They have a disagreement. But in that disagreement, what exactly it is that they do? They exchange their arguments with each other. So because you're exchanging arguments, it is called the process of argumentation, or simply put, arguing. That's exactly what lawyers do in a court. When they're litigators, that's what they do. Right? So you're constructing arguments. So this is the meaning of argument that we, in fact, go by. A little while ago, when we were talking about Bahubali, look at that. Now check. Let's check. Is this a set of statements? Are these statements interconnected? Which basically means that some of these are premises that are trying to support a conclusion. And does this set contain a conclusion? You just need to check for these three things. So is it a set? Set of statements?
Yes.
Yes. Are these interconnected? Yes. Some of these are premises. Is there a conclusion involved? Yes. So this entire structure as a result will be termed an argument. So this is the meaning that you and I will use in the reasoning classes henceforth. Okay. So now that the basic terms are done, let me introduce the technical name of the area that we are studying, and that's called critical reasoning. So within reasoning, within logical reasoning, you actually can have a lot of different varieties. You can study visual reasoning, you can study math-based reasoning, you can study non-verbal reasoning, you can study areas like syllogisms, you can study critical reasoning. So the kind of reasoning which is a part of our logical reasoning section is technically not called logical reasoning. The most specific name for it is critical reasoning. Technically it is logical reasoning. I mean, it is part of that set, but the exact subset that it belongs to is critical reasoning. So what exactly is critical reasoning? Now, have you ever heard of something called syllogism? Heard of syllogism?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In case you haven't, you remember those questions where they talk about all cats are dogs, some dogs are rats, and this and that kind of a scenario? So do you realize that syllogisms is an artificial area? I mean, you don't see that, you'll never see all cats are dogs as being true in your daily life. It's an artificial area designed to test our reasoning. Or if I talk about, say, some other aspects of logical reasoning, for example, are you up for a puzzle? Should I give you a puzzle to work on? Feel like it? Drop me a quick yes or a no, and then we'll see.
Sure, sir.
There are 24 of us here. Only 2 of you say that, okay, let's go ahead. Okay, so let's see. All right. Oh, now that there are more, let's go ahead. So, okay, here's a puzzle for you. One fine day, an insurance salesman was tasked with conducting a survey in his territory. His job for that day was to get 50 forms filled from people in his locality, in his area. Now, you know how we treat the people who conduct a survey, right? So he was not having a great day, A lot of people did not even pause to talk to him. People who paused just shooed him away. Some people, of course, helped him. So this bugger started at 8 in the morning. Very hardworking fellow. He kept at it non-stop till around 4. At 4 p.m., he thought that, okay, now I should go ahead and take a break. So he headed to a tea stall, ordered a cup of tea, and started counting the forms. And he realized that he has already, managed to get 49 forms filled. So he was left with just one form. He's very excited, The moment he could get that one form filled, he could go home for the day. So he hurriedly finished his cup of tea, walked up to the nearest house that he saw. He rang the doorbell. The door was answered by a woman. And the moment he saw the woman, the first question that he asked was, "Ma'am, how many children do you have?" Now the lady was a little taken aback, but out of that force of habit, she said 3. Then came the next question. "Ma'am, what are the ages of your 3 children?" Now, by that time, the lady had regained her composure and she is like, "Who are you? Why are you asking all this? Why should I give you this answer?" And then the moment the salesman said salesman, survey, she scolded him. The salesman also realized that he made a mistake. He should not have come out on so strong. So he apologized profusely. And then he said that, "Ma'am, I have a target of 50 forms. You know how this job is. But I've managed to get 49 forms filled. If you can help me, then I'd be able to go back home to my children. If you don't, then who knows how much longer it will take me." So the lady was a kind woman, but she was upset with the salesman. So she thought and said that, okay, I understand. But because you've been rude to me, I'll give you a clue. If you can figure out their ages, great. If you can't, great. Then it's not my responsibility. Salesman did not have much of a choice. He said that, okay, give me that clue and I'm fine with it. So the clue that the lady offered was the product of their ages is 39. So the salesman thought. He could not arrive at an answer and said, "Ma'am, please, give me one more clue, please." So he said that, okay, one last clue. And she said that the sum of their ages is equal to R, as in R here would mean the lady's house number. The salesman quickly went out to see the house number. And the very next second he came back sad. I said, "Ma'am, please give me one more clue. Please, one more clue, because I'm not able to figure out their ages still, even after this clue. One more clue and I'd be out of here." Lady said that, okay, so take this one clue. She said that my eldest child plays the piano. The moment the salesman heard this, he became happy. He like, "Oh, thank you, ma'am." He wrote their ages and went home. So, what are the ages of those 3 children? Saksham has shared an answer, 3, 13. How is, in fact, hang on. I got it wrong. I think I need to make it a little tough. Yep. The product of their ages is 36. Sorry. That will otherwise make it very easy for you. So, Saksham, I'm changing it. The product of their ages is 36. Now you'd have to think. So now you notice, look at this question. This question will test your understanding of some very basic mathematical concepts along with a structured way of thinking. But even this is an artificial kind of a thing. You won't encounter such situations in real life. However, there are a lot of arguments that you do see in your everyday life as well. Pick up a newspaper and you'd see it is full of arguments. There are elections happening in a few states or about to happen in a few states. Which party should win and which party should not win? People debate it. Somebody says party A should win, somebody says party B should win, and they have their own reasons. Their arguments. There are these cricket matches that going on where people believe in a particular team winning, a particular team not winning. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was with a very serious face. He looked at me and said, "You know what? Sania Mirza should not have married Shoaib Malik." And I was like, "Why?" And then he had his reasons too. That was an argument. So you notice, you also find a lot of arguments as part of our everyday life. So these arguments, which are a part of our everyday life, those are the ones that we study under critical reasoning. So it is not an artificial area. It is an area in which we deal with the arguments that are found in the world around us. So critical reasoning is that aspect of reasoning where we start applying our reasoning ability to the kind of arguments that are found in the world around us. So that's CR for you. That's critical reasoning for you. So you get the drift? So, Eva, 12 into 4 is 48. Our answer has to be 36. It's okay. Take your time. Solve the puzzle. Take it as homework. Okay. We can discuss it in the next class. You remind me and we can talk about it at the beginning of our next class. But reasoning has all those varieties. Okay. Syllogisms, cooked up, artificial. The question that I gave you, that kind of a variety, artificial. But critical reasoning comes really close to the kind of things that you and I encounter in our lives. So that's what makes it special. Okay. So now the next question would be that, okay, fantastic. So what do we plan to study now? Everyday life and all is fine. What is it that we plan to study? So my job is pretty simple. Our exam asks us questions. I need to ensure that you become excellent at answering those questions. So I'll basically teach you certain question types. So in our exam, we get 7 basic question types. So one of these is a question that asks us to identify the assumption inherent in an argument. A question that asks us to identify the inferences. Remember, you've probably seen these questions. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage or concluded from the passage? Then a question that asks us to strengthen an argument or weaken an argument. A question that may ask us for a flaw in the argument. Then a question that asks us to resolve a paradox, and a question that asks us to pick a parallel or similar structure argument. So these are the 7 basic question types that get asked. And in these classes, I am going to go ahead and talk about these 7 question types. Okay. So I think I should have written them in a better sequence. This will actually go here. Okay. So these questions, okay, question type 1, 3, 4, and 5 are basically the assumption family of questions. So we plan to study these 4, and thereafter we'll get into identifying the inference. So the first 4 question types that you see written here, these are the most important question types for us because these are the ones that get asked the most frequently, and thus we will spend a lot of time, a lot of effort on getting these 4 questions right. 5, 6, and 7 are not that frequent, and therefore it's okay. We talk about these because they do get asked here and there on and off, but not really our primary focus there. But the first 4 question types are the ones where I want you to have an accuracy rate of above 90% moving forward. Okay. So done. So how do we now become better at these? What do we do? How do we become good at these? Of course, the easy answer is work with me. Attend my classes and execute whatever plan that I share with you. But then, a longer answer is that, CR is a fabulous area. I teach a lot of things. Okay. So when it comes to these aptitude exams, I teach people English, I teach people reasoning. I also teach at colleges. And when I go to colleges, I teach areas like business communication, organizational behavior. I've also done my master's in psychology. So occasionally I also delve into those types. But then, out of all the areas that I teach, critical reasoning is one of my absolute favorites. And you know why I like critical reasoning? I like it because in order to become good at critical reasoning, you do not need to have knowledge of any subject whatsoever. You don't need any subject. Oh, you can just show up to the examination hall, read your passage there, answer the questions there, and you're done. You don't have to study at home per se. And from very early on, I've always absolutely loved those areas where you don't have to study at home. And then the second reason is that I find critical reasoning immensely useful. Immensely useful. There is hardly an aspect of life where critical reasoning does not play a role. Now, you may look at me and like, what? Seriously? Yes, I can actually prove it to you. Let me ask you a very point blank, generalized question. And the question is, do you always think in terms of premises and conclusions? Just give me a yes or a no. Do you always think in terms of premises and conclusions?
No.
Eklavya, what's your take? Devdutt, what say you? Do you, and see, I'm being very categorical here. Do you always think in terms of premises and conclusions? So Alankrita says no, non-verbally, because her video is on. I'm at least able to figure that out. Harsh says no. Roshni says no. Anya says no. Ishika says most likely. Most likely is in a way no. And Eklavya has still not answered. Manoj? Adityan Manoj, in this, Manoj is your given name, right? Aditya is the family name, if I'm not mistaken. I should call you Manoj or Adityan? No. Okay. So let me think. Let me see. Let's see. Why am I saying that? See, do you realize that the correct answer is yes, we always think in terms of premises and conclusions. Okay, Adityan. Got it. So why am I saying it? Alankrita, could you unmute yourself and tell me quickly what you've studied in 12th?
Sir, I am currently in 12th, but I study political science, English, psychology, and history and graphics.
Fabulous. So Alankrita, keep yourself unmuted. I am going to ask Alankrita a question. Okay. So Alankrita, what is the primary line of treatment for Crohn's disease? What is the primary line of treatment for Crohn's disease? Come on, think. Think.
Sir, I'm not really sure.
That's okay. Think. We need to start the treatment. Go ahead. Think.
Could you repeat the disease once again?
What is the primary line of treatment for Crohn's disease?
Crohn's disease.
Now, for the rest of you now, I'm asking her to think and all that. I think apart from maybe thinking some cuss words, I don't think she'd be able to think of anything else. Now, why is it that she's not able to think? Why? See, she has studied psychology, political theory, English. I'm asking her a question that is based on what is taught in taught during MBBS. So even if I force her to think, what will she really think of? So you realize she could not think because she has not studied MBBS. So in other words, she could not think because she had no basis to think. And that basis is premises, right?
Yes.
So when you don't have the basis, when you don't have the premises, you're not even able to think. If you're thinking, it is because you had some basis, some, to borrow something from psychology, some internal or external stimulus. Otherwise, your brain cannot even start functioning. So the problem is, we don't realize that we have this superpower, this brain that always thinks in terms of premises and conclusions. Every decision that you've taken in your life has been taken using this process. See that? So it is that important. So because it is that important, because it helps us in taking so many of our decisions, I'm obviously very fond of it. But that said, it does not actually mean that you can literally walk into the examination hall and ace it. You do have two prerequisites, nevertheless. Prerequisite number one is your ability to comprehend the text. So you were given a passage or a paragraph, you need to have the ability to understand it. If you do not understand it, you'd obviously not be able to process it further. Okay. And the second ability required is the ability to think objectively. So in our classes, you are going through your English classes where hopefully you are working on RC. So you'd probably pick up or learn to comprehend the text from there. In these classes, I am going to train you to become more and more objective, more and more precise, as opposed to being imaginative. Okay, so it's all about bringing in a lot of precision to our thinking. And you've opted for a career when you say that, okay, I'm going to go become a lawyer. You're opting for a career where that kind of thought process is required. So it needs to become your second nature. Just to give you just to explain what we mean by thinking objectively rather thoroughly, here is a tiny little story for you. So one fine day, three professors of a university decided to go to Australia, explore Australia, travel. So one of them was a professor of sociology. The other one was a mathematician, and the third was a philosopher. So one fine day, all the three were sitting in a train. The sociologist was looking out of the window. The mathematician was listening to some song, and the philosopher was grappling with a book. Suddenly, the sociologist exclaimed, "Oh, the sheep in Australia are black." Now, when he said that, the mathematician got up from his seat, looked out of the window, and then looked at the sociologist and said, "Come on, man. Seriously, there is only one sheep out there. You should have said that there is at least one sheep in Australia which is black." Now, you and these sociologists, you guys keep doing that, So when they started discussing it, the philosopher also got interested in that discussion. So he also left his seat. He looked out of the window. Now he looked at the mathematician and said, "Yeah, come on. If you're teaching him, at least teach him well, no? Both of you should say that there is at least one sheep in Australia whose at least one side is black. Do you see the other side? How do you know that the other side is black? Be precise. Be objective. State what you see." So you notice that objectivity, that precision, training our mind to come to that level. That's going to help us a lot in getting all our questions right. There are times when the difference between a right option and a wrong option is going to be just a single word. And that's what you and I are basically embarking upon. So that said, the very first thing that we need to realize is that in critical reasoning, we are going to meet arguments. So we need to develop the ability to analyze those arguments. And by analyzing those arguments, all I mean is that you should have this ability to read an argument and figure out the conclusion and the premises. That is the starting point. So let's start there. Let's start off by analyzing arguments. Ready? So what is an argument? I'm just asking you to identify premises and conclusions. So I've already told you that an argument typically has a conclusion along with one or more premises. Okay. So I'm going to give you some arguments. You will look at those and you'll tell me the conclusion and the premises. Fair enough? Starting here. So give me the premise and the conclusion. You can drop it in the chat or you can unmute and share your answer.
So the second part of the sentence, the class on it should not be mandatory. That's the conclusion. And the premise supporting it is this topic is easy.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So here is my take. The part in blue is our premise. The part in black is our conclusion. And in this case, my job was easy. My job was easy because the second statement actually started with so. I know that whenever we put a word like so before a statement, it indicates the presence of a conclusion. And that is why words like so are called conclusion indicators. So it's a conclusion indicator. Do you remember some other words or expressions that can act as a conclusion indicator? Any other word, any other expression that can act as a conclusion indicator?
So hence, therefore.
Fabulous. Thus, hence, therefore. Here are some more for you. Check this. Notice these. It's not an exhaustive list. In fact, some of these may have multiple jobs in the world, but normally in critical reasoning, when I see one of these expressions before a statement, in most of the situations, it tells me that it is going to be a conclusion. Right. And in case you have any doubts, I'd advise a very simple activity. Okay. If you're unsure of any of these, perform this simple activity later when the class is over. The activity is where you write two sentences. The second sentence must start with one of these expressions and then see what is happening there. And you'd see why we are calling them conclusion indicators. Okay. So second question. Sorry, my slide got a little stuck. Here it is. Roshni, that's right. Okay, so here is my answer for you. So the part in blue, the part after because is our premise, and that is because of the presence of because. So, in the previous argument, I saw a conclusion indicator. In this argument, I notice a premise indicator. So words, when do we use because? We always use because to indicate the presence of a reason. So these words can act as clues for us. Can you think of some more premise indicators? I can. See this? And at times we also use for. Remember? I hit him for he was slandering my family. So you notice in this particular case, for is in a way being used as because. So you'd see that as well here and there. So all of these are basically premise indicators for us. Now that I've shared two arguments with conclusion indicators, premise indicators, it may create this impression in your mind that, hey, oh, that's easy, right? I can read it, I'll figure out conclusion indicators, premise indicators, and the job will be done. But no, sadly, not every argument uses these indicators. It's like, when you drive on a road, there are some nice roads where when there is a left turn, they put a signpost telling you it's a left turn ahead, U-turn ahead. But then most of the times you don't find those signs. It's the exact same thing in the arguments. There are times when the author may use one of those indicators, but then most of the times the arguments that we encounter will not have any of these indicators. And that is where we need to rely on our ability to comprehend, our ability to understand. Okay, so here is the third one. In this argument, you will not find any indicator. You will have to understand it and then decide on what basis has the person arrived at the conclusion. So once you figure out, once you are able to figure out the basis, that's your premise part, and then the other part will obviously be the conclusion. So here you go. What's your take on this now? So, absolutely right. I think most of you are pretty sharp. We had better leave now. Why? If we do not, we might miss the last train and we'd be stuck here all night. So, the first sentence is the conclusion and the rest of it acts as a basis for us. Fair enough? Fair enough, guys? Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just give me a brief second. All right, so there you go. Now, so far, I gave you arguments where everything played a direct role. It was either a premise or a conclusion. But then the truth is, not everything in that passage or paragraph is kind of directly a part of an argument. So there are times when, apart from a conclusion and your premises, you may also get some additional things. Those additional things could be just a context within which that argument is being presented. At some advanced level, I'd be able to show you that there can be an argument and a counter argument involved. At an advanced level, I'll basically eventually teach you that there are times when we have these intermediate conclusions that we arrive at, and then you use them as premises, so multi-tier arguments, etc. But then for the time being, if I just restrict myself to a single argument, there are times when you presented that context. That context can be useful, but then it is not a core part of that argument. For example, if I show you this particular image, what do you think? What's happening here? What's happening here? Is it a social gathering? Is it a corporate meeting? I think it can be either, right? But the moment I add the context, now you realize now it cannot be a corporate meeting. Now it is going to be a,
Picnic.
now it has to be a social gathering
Or a
of sorts. Well, it can be a picnic, it can be a wedding party, whatever. I mean, considering that they're dressed a bit more, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of my relatives nowadays are into that destination wedding thing or destination events thing. Forget wedding. It's good fun, but it's getting on my nerves now. Every single. So there is this relative of mine who lives in the same town as I do. He celebrated his 25th wedding anniversary. So I assumed that I'm going to get an invite for a party. I'll step out, attend his event in the evening, come back. But you know what? I received an invitation that, hey, let's meet at this particular hotel in Kasoli. Both of us stay here. I had to travel from here all the way to Kasoli. What could have been taken care of in an evening ended up taking 2 days for me, 3 days actually. Because when I was going there, I thought that, hey, let me also go ahead and meet some other friends in Chandigarh the other time on that way. So your argument can also have that context, right? So for example, this is a simplified argument, right? Sarah will probably receive a job offer because she has 10 years of experience. So you see, this is your conclusion and that's your premise. But normally in our day-to-day life, that's not how people talk. People are going to give you this. Now look at this. Here is that argument, but it is embedded in a context. So you need to have that ability to identify that, okay, these are add-ons. They are not essentially an important or an integral part of the argument. So that's something that you may need to go ahead and do on and off. So let me take you through another one. I hope you've read it. I'll just give you 10 seconds for it. So you see that? Okay, so here is the next one. So I have only one question from you. What is the conclusion here? That's it. Start off by mastering this. What is the conclusion here? Paksham. That's correct. That's correct. In case you're dropping it in the chat, use a personal message, okay? Oh, hi Nikunj. How are you? Nikunj, that works. Yes, absolutely. So answers to questions in a personal message. Otherwise, you can drop it in public chat. So in fact, whenever I want it in personal, I'll tell you it should be personal. So yeah, so the basic idea is reinstate capital punishment, right? Okay, here is the next one. So this is the kind of argument, this is the kind of level that you may encounter in the exam. I'll just make it a little more visible for you. I realize I'm cutting out the last part. There you go. So now tell me, please read it and identify the argument in it, analyze it. So after reading it, tell me the conclusion. Saksham, that's right. Ishika, that's right. In fact, you can also, there is one more sentence that you could have actually highlighted. What will that other one be? Nikunj, that's right. Roshni, let's just make it a little more specific. We're talking about regulating them in a particular area, right? So that part is important. So yes, I think most of you are getting it right. You could pick up either the first sentence or the last one. And what are the reasons offered here? What are the reasons? So impossible to keep farmed salmon isolated, and when they do reach the wild, they have the potential to outcompete. Why are they able to outcompete? You have a reason for that as well. And then pollution from the farms is another basic major theme. So the moment we read these things, we should see that the author is giving us an argument. That argument has a conclusion. That conclusion is supported by some reasons. In some of those cases, those reasons themselves are backed by reasons. Right? So that's the kind of level that we want to reach while reading it. So that's analyzing. But then that's just one bit. Let us go ahead and start our work on one of the 7 question types. So let's start with the assumption family of questions, where the first question type is identify the assumption. So let's begin there. So let me start off by asking you the question. What is an assumption? How do you define it? What's an assumption?
So it's something that we naturally think or we take for granted while reading something or talking to another person. So you assume something or you make
Okay.
no.
Okay, I see that. What else? Anyone else? Hi, Nikunj. Perfect. Perfect. What else? Abhi, okay, Roshni. Slight problem, Roshni, slight problem. There is a difference between an assumption and an inference. Ishika, any specific type of belief? Hey, Mohima, we cannot really use assume while defining assumption. That won't work. Harsh, your definition is closer to being an inference than an assumption, but that's okay. These are all technical words, right? So if you were to look at a dictionary, they give you some meanings that are relevant for English, but then they may not work in reasoning anyway. So let us see. So a little while ago, you and I established this basic fact that we think in terms of premises and conclusions, right? Now the issue is that when we talk to each other, we may not state everything which is there in our mind. There are times when we remain completely silent. Then there are times when we do speak, but we leave some of the things unsaid. Okay, so let me take you through the story of things that are left unsaid. So one fine day, there was a guy who walked into a cafe. Now this guy saw a girl that he was attracted towards. So he walked up to that girl and said, right? So he's asking her out basically. The girl looked at him and said, so now tell me. The guy asked the girl out, what is her answer? She said yes. She said no.
No.
But I don't see it written here. How are you able to figure that out?
So we assume that since she has a voice,
She's not explicitly said, I won't go out with you. I won't go out with for a cup of coffee with you, right? So what's happening here? So you notice what's happening here is that if we could look into her mind, we will see not one, but two statements. Which two? I have a boyfriend, therefore I cannot go out with you. So you notice a complete argument. It has a premise and it has a conclusion. Complete argument. In her mind, there is a complete argument. But while talking to him, she stated only the premise. The conclusion was left unstated. As I said, it was left unsaid. So you notice there are times when we talk to others, we state our premise, we leave the conclusion unstated. I can give you a similar example from your life. For instance, you may walk up to a friend of yours and say, yeah, let's go for a movie. And your friend says, yeah, I have an exam tomorrow. So what is left unstated? I have an exam tomorrow, so I cannot go. So you notice, he shared only the premise. The conclusion was left unstated. So you see that? Acha, then the converse is also true. There are times when we state only the conclusion and the premises are left unstated. I haven't typed it, so I'll just create room and write. For example, array for that matter, let's say you walk up to somebody and say, or you see somebody walk up to someone and say, I love you. You realize this is a conclusion. You realize so very often when somebody says this, the other person also asks a counter question, asks a question. Why? So basically the other person is asking for, give me the reasons. What is the basis? Where are the premises? This is just a conclusion. Or for that matter, even the question that I showed you a little while ago, when you say, let us go for a movie, you notice, even this is just the conclusion. In your mind, there is an entire argument. The conclusion of that argument is, we should go for a movie. Now, why should you go for a movie? Whenever you decide to go watch a movie, why do you do that? What is the basis?
Maybe free time.
It's probably because you had free time and you wanted to watch a movie. It could be because you heard rave reviews about this movie. It could be because this movie has your favorite actor or is made by a favorite director, whatever. So you realize, so there are times when you state only the premise, conclusions are left unstated. There are times when you state only the conclusion, the premises are left unstated. And then there can be a lot of in-between things. How? What do I mean by those in-between things? Let's dive into those. So have a look at this argument. Hey, you're wearing a nice jacket. It must be expensive. Now, in this argument, this is your premise. You're wearing a nice jacket. And on the basis of this, we have arrived at the conclusion, it must be expensive. But then, hang on. Do you realize that this premise alone is not adequate, not sufficient to arrive at the conclusion? If you do want to arrive at this conclusion, you need to add one more premise, and that is this. Without this, we won't be able to arrive at that conclusion. So the person who was thinking, he actually had not one, but two premises in his mind. All nice jackets are expensive. Jacket that you're wearing is nice, therefore it must be expensive. But while talking, he stated one of these two premises, whereas the other premise was left unstated. right? Or let me give you one more example. Have a look at this. Can you figure out the premise and the conclusion?
Sir, that all doctors have a hospital.
Yep. So these two. But once again, this is an instance where this premise alone will not help you arrive at the conclusion. You must add one more premise, and that is this. So far, see, I'm not asking you to evaluate arguments yet. All I'm saying is that, hey, can you look inside the mind of a person on the basis of what he says? Can you see that entire argument behind it? I'll give you something similar, which will hopefully make it easier for you. How about, let's say I'm a Punjabi, right? So once you know I'm a Punjabi, you may come across people say, oh, you are a Punjabi, you must like butter chicken. I've actually seen people from some other culture. They look at me like, oh, Punjabi, butter chicken, balle balle. So when they say that, since you're a Punjabi, you must like butter chicken, the other premise that is there in your mind, the one that they have not shared, that the one that they've not stated is, hey, all Punjabis like butter chicken. You are a Punjabi, so you must like butter chicken. So you notice. But while talking to others, there are times when we leave some of our premises out, although those premises were absolutely important or absolutely critical for arriving at our conclusion. So are you with me so far? Does that make sense to you?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So now let's move back to our core question that I asked you a little while ago, which was, what is an assumption? So here is the answer. Or in other words, right? So I can create two types of questions in math. I can ask you this, or I can ask you this. So you see that? In the first one, I am asking you for the product, right? In reasoning, this is an equivalent of I am asking you for identifying the inference. I am asking you to arrive at a conclusion. But in the second one, the product is given. One of the terms is given. I'm asking you what was the other term that 7 was multiplied with. So this is where I'm asking you for the assumption. What must have been used along with 7 in that multiplication, that the answer was 35, right? So in the world of reasoning, when you say 7 into 7 multiplied by 5 is 35, you realize these are our premises. And this is the product is our conclusion. So an assumption is when we've just missed out on mentioning one of those factors in that multiplication. So in the exam, they ask us a question which says, which of the following has been assumed by the author? In that question, and there are going to be obviously 4 answer choices, you are looking for an answer choice that presents a new information which is critical for arriving at that conclusion, which is necessary for arriving at that conclusion. Without that information, we could not have arrived at that conclusion. That answer choice is our assumption. Okay, so I hope we have that clarity. Now, if anybody asks you about what's an assumption, our answer is it's an unstated premise. It was a piece of information that the author used in order to arrive at that conclusion, but while talking to us, that was a part that was left unsaid. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into some dive into the approach that will help us solve this particular question now. So there you. Step 1, read the paragraph or the passage and understand it. To begin with, I'm going to give you paragraphs. I'll gradually take it to the level of the exam, okay? Paraphrase if needed. What do you understand by paraphrasing? Quick, what's paraphrasing?
So rearranging it in a way that's more understandable to us.
Fabulous. So paraphrasing is basically converting it into your own language so that you find it easier to process. Once you've paraphrased it, the next step is to identify the total number of statements that are given to you. After that, the step involved is you figure out the conclusion and the premises, and then you start thinking of, hey, is there a missing premise here? Is there something that has been assumed but has not been stated? And mind you, assumptions can at times be very obvious. Assumptions can be very obvious. For example, if I tell you that, it's raining, drive carefully. It's raining, drive carefully. Now, what is the premise? What is the conclusion? It's raining, drive carefully.
So the conclusion is to drive carefully, and the
Why? Because it is raining. But
Yes.
then you notice, what is the relationship between rain and your driving carefully? There has to be some other factor that I considered before I offered that piece of advice. That factor is
Vehicles may slip during rainy season
rainy
or during rain.
conditions can
Maybe
add
various
more
accidents occur.
challenges. Rain can lead to a higher number of accidents on the road. Or rain increases the probability of your getting involved with an accident. So that missing bit, that's basically the assumption. So in the exam, you do get the options, but to begin with, I'm not going to give you options. Okay, to begin with, let's think. Okay, let's learn to think, and then eventually we'll start working with multiple choice questions. So here's your first question. Read it, understand it, identify the premise and the conclusion, and then think of the assumption. Go ahead. And as and when you figure out the assumption, share it with me in the chat, or I think it's better to share it in the chat and drop in a personal message so that others do not get biased. Roshini, fabulous. Harsh, absolutely spot on. Nikunj, that's right. So good. Let's work. So basically, when I look at it, I realize that Martians are green is the premise. Therefore, Pinchu must be green is the conclusion. Now, in this case, it's very obvious that there was an assumption involved. You know why? I see a term in the conclusion, Pinchu. But Pinchu is not even there in the premise. So a term in the conclusion cannot just suddenly come out of blue. So there must have been some other premise that was used, which talked about Pinchu. So we needed to figure that out. So you're looking for a statement that when it is added to this argument, the argument becomes valid. Okay, and here is that. We need to add Pinchu is a Martian. So absolutely. So this was the assumption here. Okay, and here is one last question for the day. We'll stop here. That's your question. What is the assumption? Amya, Alankrita, Harsh, what you've shared is very close to being the right answer. There is a very tiny mistake that has crept in, very small mistake. Can you think of that? Ishika, very small mistake. So this is the argument. Okay, I'm an idealist is your conclusion. I believe in the spiritual existence of everything is your premise. Now let me for a brief while convert it into symbols. So in a way, okay, I is A, believing in the spiritual existence of everything. Those who believe in the spiritual existence of everything, they are B. Idealist is C. So basically the argument says A is B. Therefore, A is C. So I need to add one more premise here. Forget the language. For the time being, just focus on what I've written here. So what is going to act as my other premise? B is C or C is B? Which one of the two do I need? So is it B is C? Is it C is B? Which one of the two will make this argument valid?
B is C.
B is C, right? Now, if I convert B is C, it's not C is B, it is B is C. So if I convert it back into language, what is B? B is all those who believe in the spiritual existence of everything. C is idealist. So all those who believe in the spiritual existence of everything are idealists. That's the assumption. Most of us, when they shared, you ended up sharing C is B. You said idealists believe in it. That won't make the argument correct. So a very small error. After all, you know that A is B is not necessarily equal to B is A, right? These can be two different things. It's not necessarily equal to this. So therefore this. So that's our assumption in this particular argument. So I hope now you know a bit about critical reasoning. And let me just vanish. Let me just get rid of the slide and then let's talk. Just taking a little while longer. Just give me a sec, guys. So can we in the interim recap? So what exactly it is that we have talked about? Okay. So what is it that we've talked about today? We talked about logical reasoning, where we realized that the kind of logical reasoning that gets asked nowadays is actually critical reasoning. So you know what reasoning is, you know what verbal reasoning is, you know what critical reasoning is. You know that we always think in terms of arguments, that is premises and conclusions. And you know that there are times when we may not state everything that we used in our mind to arrive at that conclusion. So there are times when we state only the conclusion. There are times when we state only the premise. There are times when we state some of the premises along with the conclusion, but the other premises are left unstated. And such unstated premises are called assumptions. So now what is it that I want you to do? There is already one piece of homework that I've shared with you. I want you to tell me the difference between a statement and a sentence. So that's one. The second thing that I want you to do is become aware of the fact that there are arguments being used around you. And in the next class, I expect you to share one such argument from your life with me. And when you become aware, you'd automatically start noticing, okay, here's an argument, premise, conclusion, etc. The third thing that I expect you to do is revise this session before you come to the class, and revise all the key concepts and then come. So the next class is going to be more of a workshop. How? In a workshop. So in this class, I am the one who's talked a lot. You're the one who's mostly listened to what I said. But in the next class, I'm going to take you through 2, 3, 4 more non-MCQs, after which we'll start solving MCQs. Okay, identify the assumption question type, multiple choice questions, and to warm you up, I will start off by asking you to analyze a few more arguments. So that's going to be the agenda for the next class, which is, by the way, which is tomorrow. So at 2 p.m. Okay. So now tell me, any questions, any concerns, anything that you need to ask? Open to you now. I'll just remove the spotlight, turn it into gallery view. And now go ahead and see. Any question that you have? Anything that you want to ask? Sir, will that be a part of the demo class? Nikunj, is it a demo class? I don't know, यार मैं तो logical reasoning पढ़ा रहा हूँ भाई आज.
Sir, in the group.
Listen,
Good morning, good evening, sir.
this is so the
Yes, sir.
demo non-demo is something that the marketing or the business end
Okay,
guy.
yes, sir.
I
Sir,
am on
I
the
joined the link.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, sir. Sorry to disturb you, sir. Sir, I joined the link via group, WhatsApp group, which was made,
Okay.
which said iQuanta,
Uh-huh.
that Mrs. Barkha was the in charge
I
of that
know.
group.
Barkha is a
So,
colleague. Yes.
so that's how I joined this meeting today.
Okay.
It said it was a demo classes for all the students who are
Possible.
interested.
It's possible. So there are times when the business end of the guys think that, see, if I want to, let us say, if I want to buy a bike, if I want to buy a car, I would prefer a test drive.
Yes, sir.
Their way of offering a test drive that, hey, is logical reasoning something that bothers you? We offer a great product, but then
Yes, sir.
why should you take our word for it? The
Yes, sir.
only way
Yes,
to
sir.
figure out whether it will work for you or not is by attending the class. So you've attended a class. So
Yes,
for
sir.
me, it is not a demo class. It is a part of the batch.
Okay, sir.
The first class of
Okay, sir.
logical reasoning. I'll build on it tomorrow.
Okay, sir.
Will we have a demo class tomorrow? I don't know. Yeah, the business guys will
No
know.
problem, sir.
But all I know is that I am definitely going to take a class tomorrow at 2 where I will
Yes,
talk
sir.
about identify the assumption questions, and then we'll
Yes,
dive
sir.
into those tricks and techniques that can help us eliminate answer choices, multiple
Yes.
choice questions, and everything else.
Yes. Thank you,
So
sir.
a lot of work for you tomorrow in the class. Yes. Anything else?
Could you give us suggestions to practice logical reasoning, like from where we could?
See, the first thing that we need to realize is that we need to understand the question and the approach, right?
Yes.
So if we do not, for example, let us say those of us who do not understand what assumption means, if they go ahead and solve this question today, then their accuracy will not be great. Right. So the first thing is let's understand the question. The second thing is figure out the ability required to answer that question and then work on that ability. That's something that we plan to do tomorrow. Then the third thing is to see, are there any strategies and tricks and techniques that can allow us to either become more accurate or become faster? So once you have these three things in place, then yes, we can go ahead and dive into more practice. So I'll take care of the practice bit. So we will practice tomorrow, but the focus will be on building that ability and to share those techniques. And thereafter, yes, we'll ensure that you get ample practice. And moreover, should I give you a secret? Should I tell you a secret? I am a very lazy person. Now I'm saying this because let's challenge it. You realize when you say, I want to practice, it is a conclusion that you have shared. Behind that conclusion, there are some premises. Your premise is that, oh, I need to practice in order to become better. Now I'm challenging that. So that was your assumption. Now I'm challenging that. I'm saying, aren't you lazy? Don't you have something better to do in life? Why do you want to even practice? So practice only as much as it is useful to get the questions right. The moment you start getting these questions right, why would you practice? I'm sure you have better things in life. So who knows, maybe after the class tomorrow and after going through a few questions which are available on your dashboard, probably your accuracy rate is already 80%. Thereafter, we'll not practice. Then we'll just write tests. And in case those tests indicate some problem, then we'll revisit the questions. Otherwise, we won't. So the default setting should never be practice. The default setting should be, hey, I need to get 80% accuracy.
Yes.
The moment you get it, and just look for the shortest way of getting there. Okay. And the moment you get it, no. So practice is overrated in that sense.
Okay, sir. Thank
What
you.
else? So otherwise, yeah, once we've gone through the class tomorrow, I will ensure that for those of us who need more practice, we get more questions.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Palak. Is it Palak who's saying who's there? For the rest of you here, the class is over. You can afford to sign out if you want to. So no questions. Okay, in that case, let's stop here today. I will see you guys once again at 2 tomorrow, where we'll move towards mastery of the assumption-based questions. Until then, I've given you some homework. Make sure that you go through that, right? Take care. See you tomorrow then.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.